We probably should have tested to see if we can even do that. We could do it. Let's just take a little clip at the beginning. Yeah, no big deal. Oh, you're covering this, so if you want.
Mr. Theo.
What's that? You're covering this. So I'm reading this around too. Just the 2-3 words.
Well, you know, I mean, it was so obvious and easy and so forth.
Get your mic on.
You'll need to give those to Mr. Ryan right there. Okay, good evening, everyone, and I want to welcome you to the Buffalo Bulletin.
Yeah, I remember. You got to get close to it.
Yes.
On.
I'll start over. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Buffalo Bulletin State Senate Republican debate between Senator John Schiffer and challenger Bob Johnson. My name is Jerry Pye, and I'm the publisher of the Buffalo Bulletin, and I will be moderating tonight's debate. During tonight's debate, please hold your applause till the end of the evening to allow each candidate to answer questions without interruption. I would also ask that you please turn off your cell phones and refrain from taking pictures during the debate. Tonight's debate will be recorded and will be available to view on the Buffalo Bulletin website at buffalobulletin.com. Now for the format for tonight's debate. Each candidate will be asked a question and be given 2 minutes for their response, followed by a 1-minute rebuttal from their opponent. We have flipped a coin prior to the debate to determine whose opening statement will be heard first, and Mr. Johnson won. Okay, gentlemen, in your opening statement, please provide a brief biography outlining your qualifications for this office, including education, military service, work background, and how long you've been a Sheridan County or Johnson County resident. Thank you. You have the floor.
I'm Bob Johnson from Kearney. I live 1 mile south of Johnson-Sheridan County line on the ridge overlooking Fort Phil, pretty well in the center of Senate District 22. I'm a proud and conservative Republican. I have the NRA endorsement in this race, I have the Wyoming Family Coalition endorsement in this race, and I have the Wild Watch endorsement in this race. Most importantly, I am not a liberal Democrat running on a Republican ticket. Time is limited, so I'll just tell you a few things I will not do. I will not be, once elected senator. I will not chase your vote by saying conservative slogans and then casting liberal Democrat votes. I will not run interference for associations and public unions and Cheyenne bureaucrats. I will not cozy up to lobbyists in order to get out of Wyoming, outside of Wyoming contributions. But what I will do is represent the citizens of Sheridan and Johnson County, not the Cheyenne bureaucrats and lobbyists and associations and unions. I've signed the pledge of the Americans for Tax Reform to oppose any and all efforts to increase taxes and fees. I will be vigilant to turn back the mandates which constantly come from Washington. Wyoming's future requires being free from such mandates. They will bankrupt our great state just like Washington has already bankrupted the whole country. I am not interested in being a career politician. I've never run for public office. My whole working life has been as industrial chemist and chemical engineer. I worked for Dow Chemical Company and Phillips Petroleum Company. I was a professor at the College of Engineering at Georgia Tech and Texas Tech. Now, 2 important questions. What creates jobs in Wyoming? And what keeps our property taxes down in Wyoming in spite of runaway spending in Cheyenne and Buffalo? It's technology. It's crucial for Wyoming through its legislature to promote the recovery of Wyoming's massive underground energy resources. In-depth background in chemical technology is in short supply in the Wyoming Senate. So why is it important? Because various bills with the intent of promoting energy and development must be properly evaluated. Finally, I say to you that I totally support family values, sanctity of life, and traditional marriage. I served in the Korean War for 4 years in the Far East. in Tokyo area. Thank you.
My name is John Schiffer. First of all, I'd like to thank the Bulletin, Mr. Pye, for putting this on. I appreciate it. This is what our form of government is all about, is you all holding us accountable. When I go to Cheyenne, I work for you. I grew up in Sheridan and Johnson counties, attended school there. I got a BA degree in economics from Colorado College. I then enlisted in the U.S. Navy. I served an extended combat tour in Vietnam in a river detachment. At the end of that tour, I did the smartest thing I've ever done, which is marry my wife Nancy, who I'm still married to, and for that, thank you, sweetheart. We've raised 2 kids here in Johnson County. One of them still works here. He's a geologist in the minerals industry. And I've been your senator, and I've been privileged to be your senator for the last 19 years. I've never taken a pledge to any outside group, be they in Virginia or Washington, D.C. or Cheyenne. I don't do that. I'm answerable to you, my friends and constituents, and those are the only groups that I'm beholden to. I've worked hard to develop these 2 counties in terms of jobs and the economy. I lived here when we saw the bust in the 90s. As a matter of fact, I served on the Appropriations Committee and had to balance the budget for the state of Wyoming when we had absolutely no money. There was no money in the till. I've lived through that. It appears we're in another downturn. We don't use the word bust yet, but I suspect we will. And I've done it before, I can do it again. Is it easy? No, but it's what you expect me to do on your behalf when I go to Cheyenne. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. Thank you for coming this evening.
The first question will go to Mr. Johnson. He will have 2 minutes to answer the question, and then Mr. Schaffer will have 2 minutes, and then obviously Mr. Johnson will have 1 opportunity for a rebuttal. Okay, do you consider yourself more of a Al Simpson Republican or a Tea Party Republican, and why?
Would you please repeat that?
Do you consider yourself more of a Al Simpson Republican or a Tea Party Republican, and why?
Well, I'm not really very clear about what kind of a Republican Al Simpson was. But I tell you, my great-great-great-grandfather fought in the Revolutionary War, and he fought against the King of England. And that war was all about all kinds of stamp taxes and tea taxes and gun taxes, and that started the Revolutionary War. And my great-great-great-grandfather, Valentine Peyton, was a lieutenant in the Virginia Army, the Virginia Volunteer Army, and he was a battlefield surgeon, up to his hips in blood and muck. And I've got his blood in me. And so I really am a Tea Party man. But the Tea Party has been very important. It really busted open the state legislature 2 years ago. You remember how the composition of the Wyoming legislature changed 2 years ago? It was the Tea Party that did it. And let me tell you, in November, there's going to be more of it.
Senator?
It's a great question. And luckily, I've lived here long enough that I know Senator Simpson. I've had the opportunity to visit with him because I've lived here all my life. I will tell you, I am not a Tea Party candidate. What I believe in is responsible government that's accountable to the people. I believe in balanced budgets. I believe in taking care of that function of the state, which is to promote our economy and our way of life, to protect it, if you will. It is under threat, I agree. But they do in Washington. I have very little control. I have no control over it. The president doesn't call me up every morning and say, John, what direction do I go? But I can visit because I know the people with our leaders, and I can put together a program that tries to work towards prosperity and the protection of this part of the world.
Mr. Johnson, you have 1 minute rebuttal if you wish. If not, we'll go to the next question.
No rebuttal.
Okay. Senator, you have the next question. With the decline in natural gas prices as well as the national shift away from coal to electric power, it is likely that Wyoming's revenue picture will not be as rosy as the past decade. What are your budget priorities? Where would you like to cut spending to keep expenditures in line with revenues?
The price of natural gas right now is right around that $2 per million cubic feet. That's the way they measure it. Every time the price of gas drops $1, the tax revenue drops $100 million for natural gas. That's how dependent we are. In view of where we're at now, roughly $2 and a little bit of change at either hub. It seems to me we have to go in and look at budgets, which I can do. I can probably read the budget better than virtually any other senator that's serving now. I spent a long time on appropriations. It's not difficult to read. It's kind of a knack to reading it. You go in and if we're going to cut, let's cut where it makes sense. Let's minimize the bloodletting. But let's understand what we need as the population of the state and the population of these counties need. And let's match it up. There are ways to cut it. In my job as chairman of the Highways, Transportation, and Military Affairs Committee, that's the committee I chair. I work with 2 agencies, the military department. I've already sat down with them. The governor's asked for an 8% cut. We can make an 8% cut, and it will minimize the damage. I will tell you, I am still negotiating with the Department of Transportation. That's a mammoth budget. But my goal is, in my negotiations with them, is to say that we take care of the maintenance of our highways. First and foremost, this state relies on our highway system, be it city streets, county roads, state highways, state federal highways, or our 3 interstates. I'm going to protect the money we have to maintain our highways. We're right in the midst of negotiations with those folks. That's what I do on your behalf.
Mr. Johnson.
This is a great editorial in the Buffalo Bulletin on the 19th of April. Oh Lordy, please give us just one more boom. This time we won't screw it up. Well, I agree with that to a good extent, to a great extent. Because let me tell you folks, it doesn't matter whether Mitt Romney wins this election or Barack Hussein Obama, hard times are coming. Because Washington has already bankrupted this whole country, and sure, we're sitting pretty good, in a good spot here in Wyoming, because we're sitting on top of all these mineral resources underground. But this is going to filter back to us, because Washington has been giving us mandates and paying for it to some degree in the past, but that's going to peter out, and we're going to be left high and dry. So we need people in Cheyenne, in the legislature, who will be tough and will stand up to any further mandates coming down from Washington, whether it's a Republican regime or a Democrat one. And we have to also have people in Cheyenne who will be frugal with the bucks. It's going to be hard times, folks. I've seen it since I came to Wyoming 4 years ago. Things have gone downhill, really downhill. And I told people 4 years ago when I got here what was coming. And it's happening, and it's going to get worse. So, we have to be very frugal. We have to be very careful. We don't need any new taxes, folks. We don't need any new taxes. We need to find where those money parts are, stuck back around like the Game and Fish Commission has, trying to spend $3 million to buy Lake DeSmet. That's the last thing in the world that we need. There's plenty of money around. We don't need any new taxes.
Senator, you have a 1 minute rebuttal if you wish.
It may be the only thing that Mr. Johnson and I agree on is he's right, we're facing hard times. Let me point out that almost 10 years ago, a member of the House of Representatives named Frank Phelps, some of you may know him from over in Thermop, and myself, carried a bill that diverted an extra 1% of the severance tax into our permanent mineral trust fund. That money gets invested, doesn't cost the citizens anything in taxes, and yet now it has become the third leading revenue stream for the state. If you want to talk about adding a diversity of revenue streams to the state, I've done it, and I know how to do it. And again, I have lived through the hard times before my opponent even thought about living in Wyoming.
Mr. Johnson, the next question is for you. In the light of the Citizens United U.S. Supreme Court decision, there is a great deal of discussion on outside spending and campaigns. For full disclosure for the people of Johnson County, who is funding your campaign or is funding a campaign on your behalf, and how much money has been spent on your campaign to date?
I'll be happy to answer that question. It's been floating around not only in Buffalo, but also in Sheridan, that I am being backed by the Koch brothers in Kansas City, who are great Tea Party movement supporters. Well, this is simply a page out of the Obama Democrat playbook. When you don't want to have to speak about your poor record, about the poor votes that my opponent has cast over, at least certainly over the last 2 years. You have to resort to some way to smear your opponent. And that's what's going on. I don't even know anybody named Koch, except one person down on Sussex Road who asked me to put up a yard sign, which I did myself. I have received 0 pennies or dollars from out of the state. All of the contributions I have received have come from individual people. $276, I think, in total. One man put 6 $1 bills into an envelope and didn't even give his name and address. There have been another $20 bill, some checks for $20 and $25 and $50. $276. The rest of the money I have contributed myself, because I am doing this to honor my great-great-great-grandfather, Lieutenant Valentine Peyton, who fought for this country in the Revolutionary War. He was proud of this country, and so am I.
Senator?
I have filed we have to file a report, what's called a pre-election financial report. I've already filed mine. I list contributions in total of $1,500. They all came from in-state. And by the way, and I appreciate the family that they live right down the river, but you don't call them Koches, they're Coes. And that's the kind of thing I know is how to address families by the right pronunciation of their names. But that takes, you've got to live here a while to learn that sort of thing. It seems to me and I'm happy to file those kind of reports. People should be able to call me up and say, John, have you ever signed off on a pledge to an out-of-state organization? Organizations in Virginia, Washington, D.C., Cheyenne. Because let me tell you folks what happens when you sign those pledges. A bill comes up, and you get a phone call or an email saying, this is the way you will vote. I've never done that, never in 19 years. And I have no intention of doing it now. If my opponent wants to sign pledges to out-of-state organizations promising his vote, that's okay, but understand exactly what it means. It is a pledge to vote as somebody in Virginia tells you to vote. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, you have a 1-minute rebuttal, if you wish.
No.
Okay. Next question. Senator Schiffer, the Wyoming legislature passed a law allowing citizens to carry concealed weapons without a permit. What is your opinion about this piece of legislation?
It's a good question. It's a tough issue. It's a copy of the Wyoming Constitution. When you go to the Senate to take an oath to support this Constitution, let me read for you Article 1, Section 24, the right to bear arms. The right of a citizen to bear arms in defense of themselves and of the state shall not be denied. I believe in the Constitution. I've always supported it. And over the course of time, this has stood us in good stead. I have voted for legislation that said we will not allow a student to bring a gun on a bus. We will not allow a citizen to carry a weapon into the governor's office. To me, that just makes sense. That just makes sense. The bill that's been referenced here says you have a constitutional right to carry a gun anywhere. When you put it in the Constitution, we as legislators cannot overrule the Constitution. I believe Article 1, Section 24 is right on. It's clear. It says defense. I support that 1,000%. But I also use some common sense and say, what's appropriate for Wyoming? Those of us that have lived here a while, we remember the incident at Cokeville. And those people are still living with it. We've got to use some common sense when we start making laws, not be dictated by outside interests. I stand by my votes.
Mr. Johnson, you have 2 minutes.
How much? 2 minutes. Mr. Pye had a very good op-ed in last week's Buffalo Bulletin.
Use the microphone.
Thank you. Mr. Pye had a very good op-ed column in Buffalo Bulletin last week titled Gun Control and Freedom of Speech. He got everything right except saying that assault rifles should not be sold to average citizens. They are weapons for the military. Well, folks, assault rifles are guns which are not just for the military. They were developed by 1880. They have been used for hunting and target shooting and self-defense since that time. Now, what people really think about are those Tommy guns that Bonnie and Clyde had during the 1930s. Now, those were fully automatic weapons. We don't have those anymore. If anybody has got one, they've got to have it neutered so it'll only be a single shot gun. You must pull the trigger every time to make it shoot a bullet. So this assault rifles were banned in 1994 by Congress, but only for 10 years. That ban expired, and Congress found that there's no data to support, there was no data in 2004 to support reinstituting it. But just think about it. This incident down in Aurora with 12 dead and 58 injured. Are we going to ban theaters? If we want to ban guns of any kind. We're going to ban school buses? You know, in Carrollton, Kentucky, my home state, school bus killed 27 people. Yuba City, Arizona, killed 29 people, a teacher and 28 students. They don't even have seatbelts yet.
Senator, you have a 1-minute rebuttal if you wish.
Those of you who know me, you know that I have a gun in my pickup, I pack a gun. I taught both of my children to hunt and shoot. We still go hunting together. Sadly enough, my son Ben has better eyesight. That's why he can outshoot me now. It's not because I'm less skillful than he is. I assure you, I just can't believe that. But he does. But we do it. It's part of our heritage. It's part of our life. I'm not going to change my lifestyle, but I'm not going to be dictated to either. You got to use some common sense where somebody's carrying a deadly weapon.
Mr. Johnson, you have the next question. There appears to be a growing split in the Wyoming Republican Party between centralist and more right-wing members. Where would you consider yourself on this scale? Are you willing to compromise on issues to pass legislation? Why or why not?
Well, I've already said what I am. I'm a conservative Republican. I'm running on the Republican ticket. I'm not a liberal Democrat who is running on the Democratic ticket. That is how I define myself. Of course, getting the legislation done, except we probably don't need a hell of a lot more, you know. In the 2011 session, there were 438 bills, counting both those in the House and the Senate. And in the 2012 session, there were 244. And a lot of them passed, and a lot of them were pretty trivial. So I don't believe this old saw that says, oh, we got to get some new things done. We got enough laws on the books already. So there's important things that should be done. But we need to pare down and do things that are really important in Cheyenne. That's why those bumper stickers exist, you know. I got 2 of them on my truck. Johnson County hasn't trusted Cheyenne since 1892.
Mr. Johnson? I'm sorry, Senator.
Want me to give you another shot?
My apologies.
No, it's all right. You know, folks, times change. Let me give you an example of that. 15 years ago, it was unimaginable that we would see the largest call-up of our National Guard in the state's history. We sent 1,100 men and women over to Iraq on a year's deployment. Times truly do change. We've never done that before. In response to that, I carried some legislation to take care of their families while they're gone, to provide them some relief when they get home, to provide some programs so their training will transfer over when they do get back. Times change. There's a need for us to change with them. Whether I think fiscally I'm an extremely conservative Republican. That's how you balance budgets. But how am I going to take care of the needs of Wyoming, the needs of Sheridan and Johnson counties? And we deployed 50 of those people, and I'm proud of it. Then I'm going to respond to their needs while they're over there, and I'm going to respond to their needs when they come home. Times do change. To say we don't need to enact any more legislation, I don't think it's the proper approach to being a leader at all.
Mr. Johnson, you have a 1-minute rebuttal if you wish.
No.
Thank you. Senator, has the legislature been proactive to facilitate the delisting of wolves, or do you believe another course of action should be pursued? If not, what course of action?
Wolves and the definition of how we handle wolves has been a very tough issue. I was president of the Senate in 2007, 2008, and as part of that, I had to negotiate with the Fish and Wildlife Service, along with our governor, on how we are going to approach the release of wolves in our area. When I say negotiate, you do not negotiate like we think of it, back and forth with the Fish and Wildlife Service. They send you a letter, and you respond, and then they send you another letter. I'm very proud of the fact that Wyoming defined a system that suits our needs. We split the state. There's an area where wolves are trophy. There's an area where the wolves are predators. And predators means you can shoot them on sight. I believe that will get tested in court. I do not know whether we will prevail in court. I have no idea. I'm not a lawyer, you know that. But we did the best we could. And we'll let the courts decide whether we get to keep the word predator. If we can't, then I think we have to go back and rethink how we can protect our interests. And it'll take some creative thinking. But one way or the other, I am absolutely convinced that we as a state need to manage things like wolves and bears and those kind of things that can threaten not only human life, but the livelihood of some of our people. Particularly in this area, we know what it's like. We have got wolves in the bighorns, and so it's up to us to figure out a solution. We're working our way through it.
Mr. Johnson? You have 2 minutes.
Would you repeat the question?
Has the legislature been proactive to facilitate the delisting of wolves, or do you believe another course of action should be pursued? If not, what course of action?
I must say I don't know very much about this subject. I think,
Mr. Johnson?
Microphone.
I must say I don't know very much about this subject, except that I believe the governor has requested Washington to delist the wolf, getting him off of that endangered species list. I believe that's already happened in Montana and Idaho, and I would agree that it should happen here.
Senator, you have a 1-minute rebuttal. Okay. Mr. Johnson, this question is for you. The Wyoming Constitution mandates adequate funding for education. What do you consider adequate funding for our schools? Is the School Facilities Commission functioning as the legislature intended? What is your opinion about the results Wyoming and Johnson County have achieved in education?
Well, I was born in 1929. I went to school in the 1930s and the 40s and the 50s. And I finally got out of university in 1963 after 12 years. I know a lot about education. My father and mother were both school principals and superintendents. And of course, I myself was a professor at Georgia Tech and Texas Tech and the University of Minnesota. I clearly have seen education results to come down since my day. And one thing that worries me is that teachers' unions have gone up at the same time. You all know what's happened in Wisconsin. Of course, in Wyoming, we have a right to work law. And no teacher can be forced to join the union, at least by brass knuckle tactics. I believe that Wyoming spends enough on education. I think the statistics show that Wyoming spends per capita, per pupil, in the highest part of the 50 states. And I believe that the legislature may be actually trying to micromanage education. I certainly believe that parents should have the right, much more right than they have right now, to decide where their children go to school. It's become sort of fashionable to think that people shouldn't teach their kids at home. I used to be a great believer in public schools, but that's sort of gone down.
I have the privilege in Senate District 22 of representing all or part of 4 different school districts. A very large district, Sheridan District 2 is a large district. The smallest school district in the state is Claremont-Arvada. They're within Senate District 22. Johnson County is right kind of in the middle, as is Sheridan District 1, kind of middle of the road, kind of middle in size. Over the years, we have worked hard to provide the resources to our school districts and our school boards. When we provide those resources, they come in what is known as a block grant. The legislature does not tell your local school board how to spend the money. We say, here is a block grant, funding per pupil. Go and spend the money the way it seems appropriate, given your community. And I assure you folks, and I'll use the big and the little, I have the opportunity, and I enjoy it. It's one of the most fun things I do. Spend a day down in Claremont-Arvada visiting with those kids. When I was down there this year, I got to read about the little book on ladybugs to the kindergarten kids, but visit with them. Sadly enough, I'm old, and the most difficult part was getting back up after sitting on the floor with the kindergarten kids at Claremont. But it's a wonderful experience. That is an extraordinary school. A 0 dropout rate. It's totally focused on what the student needs are. I have the opportunity to go up and attend various classes and visit with Sheridan District 2, a very large district. It is different, the emphasis is different, but it is a wonderful education. I think the work in progress is still to make sure we hold school districts accountable for the quality of the education. And right now the legislature is working its way through that. I anticipate we'll get there.
Mr. Johnson, you have a 1-minute rebuttal if you wish. Thank you. Each candidate has been given the opportunity to ask his opponent a question. The first question will come from Mr. Johnson. You have the floor.
Mr. Schiffer, About 3 years ago, I began to notice, or have a hunch that our senators and representatives in Johnson, Sheridan County were casting really sort of strange votes. And so I spent a lot of hours tabulating the roll call votes for the last two sessions, 2011 and 2012, off the Wyoming Legislative website. Just here is 22-page hard copy in Wyoming legislative format of the roll call votes, just for the Johnson County and Sheridan County representatives and senators. I've got the impression that our senators and representatives go off to Cheyenne and they think there's some kind of iron curtain that comes down so that people can't see anymore, can't see what kind of shenanigans that they're carrying on down there. Well, it's here. Their votes. And they're really kind of crazy. I'm amazed that our senator would cast votes as he has. For example,
Mr. Johnson, your question for Senator Schiffer is what?
my question is, why have you cast votes on guns, on health care, on energy and technology, on family values, which are totally inconsistent with the majority of the people in Johnson and Sheridan County who are your constituents? I just can't understand that.
Senator, you have the floor.
I have to be honest, I don't understand the question, but I'll take a whack at it. Goes with the territory. Guns, I've already addressed that. I abide by the Wyoming Constitution because I swore an oath to uphold it. Enough said there. Health care, and I serve on the Health Committee. That has been a difficult issue. The way I have voted consistently has been to say, how do we design a better system of health care that fits the state of Wyoming? I understand the federal legislation, sort of, although it is very difficult because it's being defined as we go along by the people in Washington. But if we can improve the quality and the cost of health care and health insurance in Wyoming, that's what I've got in mind to do. Again, it's a little tough. I know I've been accused of voting, but I'm not sure what my opponent's getting at. In terms of energy, I have consistently supported improving our energy and our energy development in Wyoming. In terms of the uranium industry, for example, I sponsored the bill during the 90s when the uranium industry was on the ropes. And understand, we have the only, at that time, the only active uranium mine to keep that company going. We gave them some tax relief. They're still going today. They're an operating mine down in southern Johnson County. I have also sponsored and supported doing research to enhance the value of our liquid and our natural gas. That's been my position all along, but understand, I do it always keeping in mind that we've got to protect our way of life and those things we value.
Mr. Johnson, you have a 1-minute rebuttal to that answer if you wish.
I'm really having trouble hearing. It seems the speakers are someplace, and it comes across as a great blur to me.
So do you wish to make a rebuttal at this time?
Well, I'm not in a position to.
Okay. Senator, your question to Mr. Johnson?
going to stand up if I may so I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Johnson, can you hear me now? Because I'm talking right into the microphone. And the way politics works is you got to listen to people.
What's that?
The way politics works, you got to listen to people. That's the way the Senate conducts business and the House of Representatives. Come to Cheyenne and visit us sometime and you'll see. I do have a question. And I'd like to hear the specifics. I have a record on promoting our economy in District 22, preserving our way of life. I'll stand by that record. I would like to hear the specifics from my opponent on how he intends to take care of his friends and neighbors in District 22.
You know, Kearney is not exactly a fancy neighborhood. You got to go up there sometime. As I've said, my background is in technology my whole life. The important thing about Wyoming that we must utilize is all of these underground resources. I talk to people around who've been in Wyoming all their life, who've tried to work in the energy sector, and they complain that when the legislature's doing something, it gives the work to companies out of this state. It's no surprise that my opponent gets most of his, or 20% of his contributions from out of the state, from large companies. That's not a mystery. For the last election cycle in 2008, which is the latest one reported, that's quite clear. However, it's going to be very important if we're going to withstand in Wyoming all of this crushing Washington mandates where Washington tries to shove the burden down onto us. We're at a cliff, a financial brink. Not only is the federal government broke, and we're not broke, we're doing reasonably well. We've got about enough money in the rainy day fund to pay for 1 year. But you know, if you told people that in 1932, they would say, well, what about 1934? So we must be very diligent to use the capability that we have and the resources that Providence gave us underground.
Senator, you have a 1-minute rebuttal if you wish.
In Wyoming, one of the things people value is honesty. And in these letters, I'm not sure my opponent has always been honest when he characterized my voting record. But you just heard one more instance of dishonesty. You can go back and check, Secretary of State, I did not receive 20% of my contributions from out of state. It's unfortunate that he brings with him from wherever he's been, Georgia, Texas, or Minnesota, their way of doing things. In Wyoming, we do things different. We're straight up, we're honest. I have been that way for 19 years, and I'll continue to be that way.
Gentlemen, we will take a brief break, and then when we come back, we will have questions from the audience. We'll have at least 2 questions from the audience, possibly 3, depending on the questions. But we'll take a brief break and then have those questions at that time.
Does anyone have questions that they have not submitted?
Much of this is Schiffer's using for conduit irrigation water. Comes out, somewhere, and runs through the ditch and runs through gutters.
Let me give this to Ron. Ron.
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
You'll marry me? How you doing tonight? Very well, thank you, sir.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Huh?
Can you hear me all right?
Put it in front of the podium where we can hear the speakers.
Yeah, put it in front of the guy. Yeah, there you go. You got a desk?
Big old whispering contest.
Dizzy. Just hold it in their hand. Hey, you know, I've done enough things to shoot myself in the foot. I've slammed my hand in the door. Don't give up that easy. Yeah. Take the skis out of my truck.
Can you hear me if we have the mic like this? Does that work? Okay.
Is everybody here?
Yes,
Very good, yeah.
you're here.
Okay, we will go ahead and start back. There are 5 questions from the audience, and well, we have selected 5. There were several more, obviously, and these are some good questions. And we selected questions that had not been asked or had not been fully answered. So we will ask these 5 questions for the audience, and I'm indeed grateful that y'all came up with a good list of questions and so forth. And I want to compliment y'all too. It has been very smooth and efficient. Let's see here. The last question was to, okay, Mr. Johnson, the question goes to you first. If you both support the Second Amendment, why has the NRA endorsed Mr. Johnson with an A- while giving Mr. Schiffer a C+?
That's very simple. It's because of the votes, 4 major votes that he cast during the year 2011. In 2010, the concealed constitutional carry bill passed the House. It was blocked in the Senate. In November of that year, 2010, there was an election. November 2010, the Tea Party sent a lot of people scurrying out of the Wyoming legislature. And then 3 months later, the same bill went right through the House and right through the Senate. My opponent voted against it again. Other bills as well, like the right constitutional amendment on the right to hunt and fish and trap. It's a very simple thing, just enshrining in the Constitution that we have the tradition and the right to do those things. Very simple. But my opponent voted against it, along with 9 people, but it passed. And was signed into law. So there should be when you go to the poll in November, there should be something for you to vote on as a constitutional amendment, whether we in Wyoming have the right to hunt and fish and trap.
Senator?
Again, let me go over. When you pledge a vote to an outside interest, that's exactly what it means. You pledge to vote the way they tell you. I've never signed that. I always get a C+ rating because I vote in support of gun ownership, being able to carry guns, but I do it in a way that suits Wyoming. I don't know of anyone in Wyoming that wants us to say, if you're a 12, a 13, 14, 15-year-old student, you can pack a gun on a bus. If you put it in the Constitution, then you take away the ability to tell that young person, don't bring a gun onto the bus. In terms of the constitutional right to hunt and fish, we have the right to hunt and fish. That's a piece of legislation looking for a problem to solve. The problem doesn't exist. We have wonderful hunting here. I'm very proud of our hunting. I enjoy hunting myself. To say we have to enshrine it in the Constitution, as I said, it's not a problem. We already have it. I consider amendments to the Constitution to be very, very serious. We've lived with our Constitution since 1890. When we go in to amend it, it's serious business. Frivolous amendments, I think, have no place in our discussion.
Mr. Johnson, you have a 1-minute rebuttal if you wish. Okay, thank you. Senator, next question. Please state clearly your views on marriage. Does this play into your legislative pursuit should you be elected again?
Marriage in Wyoming is defined as a union between a man and a woman. And that's exactly what the statute says, exactly. That's crystal clear to me. I support it. Enough said. The statute is absolutely clear. Marriage is between a man and a woman in the state of Wyoming.
Mr. Johnson?
This particular thing needs to be codified in the Constitution, which my opponent is against. Allowing the citizens of the state to vote on whether marriage is between a man and a woman. It's so simple. Up at the Main Street Diner where I eat quite a bit, you know, it's sort of, the word sort of passes around, you know. This thing between two men getting married or two women getting married, you know, it's going too far. Is the next thing going to be a man and his sheep wanting to get married? Well, that's where it's going, folks. I guess I'm just an old timer, but I don't fall for these new age fads and fashions. New age of Aquarius. It's fashionable in other places like Minnesota and Colorado and New York City and San Francisco. But this is Wyoming, folks, and the people of Johnson County and Sheridan County don't want it.
Senator, do you desire a 1 minute? Okay. Mr. Johnson, next question is yours. Are you pro-life? Psalm says, when you were in the womb, you were fearfully and wonderfully made. Does this sound like to you that life is sacred and precious in the womb?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand what you said.
Are you pro-life? Psalm says, when you were in the womb, you were fearfully and wonderfully made. Does this sound like to you that life is sacred and precious in the womb?
Well, I certainly can't argue with that. That's asked and answered. The question was asked and it was answered, and correctly. I have no argument with that at all.
Senator?
I am pro-choice. I believe that those kind of decisions are best made between a woman. I think oftentimes, I know in our case, that Nancy and I talk about things like that, whether it's birth control or whatever. But that's a man and a wife talking about the health care of a woman. I think that kind of thing is not something that 90 members of the Wyoming legislature should even be messing with. That's a very, very private matter. The good thing about the Republican Party, and I've been a Republican for 40 years, the Republican Party doesn't even deal with that. It's not part of our platform. It's not part of our issues. The Republican Party considers that a private issue. But I'll say, just in case anybody misunderstands, I am pro-choice. I believe in the right of a woman to decide whether it's in a discussion with her doctor, her spouse, or whatever, perhaps maybe even her priest. That is a private decision and has no business being decided by us in the legislature.
Mr. Johnson, you have a 1 minute rebuttal if you wish.
No rebuttal.
Okay. Senator, have you pledged to any outside groups, and if so, which ones are they and why?
In 19 years, I have never signed a pledge to any outside groups. My allegiance, my responsibility has always been to my friends, my neighbors, my constituents in Senate District 2. I will assure you, I am not going to pledge my vote to groups from Washington, D.C., from Virginia, from Cheyenne, and as far as I know, my opponent has pledged to groups in between all that. I don't know. I don't do that sort of thing. I'm responsible to you folks. You hire me every 4 years if you vote for me. If you don't like what I'm doing, you vote me out. But I will not vote on behalf of outside interests, and I will not promise my vote to anyone outside of Senate District 22.
Mr. Johnson, you have the floor.
I already said, folks, that I signed the pledge to the Americans on Tax Reform that I will oppose any and all tax increases and fee increases, whether it's on hunting licenses or driver's licenses or anything else. Other than that, I've not made a formal pledge, I believe. However, it's probably pretty close to that, to watch, that I support the sanctity of life and I support the traditional marriage. I've had enough of you see, that's one advantage of not having lived in Wyoming all my life, or 40 years, or 30, or even 20, because I've seen what crazy things go on out there in the rest of this world. I lived in Minneapolis for 36 years. The place was taken over by radical lesbians. And they get married, they have a kid somehow or another, and then they've now figured out that there are 510 rights that they're not allowed because they're not allowed to get married in the state of Minnesota. Well, it's fine and dandy for two men, or two women, if they want to go off in a cave someplace or off to Kearney and live in a log cabin. But to expect the taxpayers to give them all sorts of benefits that go to married people, legally married people, is wrong.
Senator, you have a 1-minute rebuttal if you wish. Okay. The final question is to Mr. Johnson. Would you explain what, if any, safeguards should be placed on the extraction of Wyoming minerals and other natural resources?
Well, that is a very broad and open-ended question. But I can only answer it in the same fashion. It depends upon having people in the legislature who understand chemical engineering and technology and industrial chemistry, and I sure do. But you know, we got an awful lot of lawyers and business administration people down there in Cheyenne. And they don't know much more than a few buzzwords. They're not able to really evaluate things. So, good chemical engineering practice would certainly dictate removing resources from underground in such a fashion that it was not really unreasonably and imprudently restorable. This happened all over this country. We've been mining underground resources for 200 years.
Senator?
It seems to me that there are some areas that we need to pay attention to when we talk about mineral development. And I'll kind of list 4 of them. First thing, we need to protect our way of life. Some of the best paying jobs jobs in Sheridan and Johnson County are in the development of our natural resources, gas, oil, coal, uranium. We need those jobs. Our young people need those jobs. And we can balance, and I believe we have reached a balance, between our way of life, open space, if you will, the ability to recreate, to go fish, to go hunt, to just enjoy the outdoors with mineral development. It is a balance, and I think we can continue to do that. Second thing we've got to be very cognizant of is protecting our water. Water is the lifeblood of this state. Particularly a year like this, we've got to protect our water, and I think we've done a good job of that. But a couple areas where we're struggling, and I admit it. We've got to take care of the safety of our workers. Wyoming has the worst safety record of any state in the union. We're working on it. We're working with industry, not imposing new laws. That isn't how you do it. You get them to buy into it. You get them to work with you to make our workplaces safety, and I hope we could protect our workers, because we're not doing too good so far. And the last one is we need to develop enhanced value for our minerals. For example, we need to develop the ability and actually implement changing coal into liquids that's saleable, coal into gas. We can do that with research, with people that are up to date on research. We can do that through our university. But again, we can do that in partnership with private industry, such as our partnership with General Electric, which I help promote.
Mr. Johnson, you have a 1-minute rebuttal if you wish. Thank you. Okay, it's time for closing remarks. Senator, you have the first closing remarks. You have 2 minutes.
First of all, thank you to the Buffalo Bulletin for holding this forum. I appreciate it. Second of all, thank you to you all. You've elected me time and again to go down and represent you in the Senate. I hope I've done a good job. I've tried my best. I'm very knowledgeable about this area, the people who live here, and particularly about our lifestyle. I live it also. I grew up with it. I still live it. I still love it, quite frankly. I think that I can represent you in Cheyenne, and I think I could do a good job of it. I also am open to any discussions, be it by phone, by email, or in person. I don't think I've ever turned anyone down, not that I can remember. I hope not. But I've done the best I can do. I hope you'll send me back again. My work is not finished. I think I have the experience, and I think I have some ability to enact the programs and the efforts that you have sent me down there to do for the past 19 years. Thank you.
I've lived in Kearney for 4 years. I may be a latecomer, but I love Wyoming. I love being up there on the ridge in the solace of open spaces. It is magnificent, particularly since I escaped, as I tell people, from communist Minneapolis.
Oh, please.
When I went to Minneapolis in 1972, it was a great city. But I'll tell you, times change. And I finally got out of there. You may ask, you may wonder, why is this old codger, 83 years old, running for senator There's a couple of reasons. I said one of them last Thursday night and showed them. My great-great-great-grandfather, Valentine Peyton, he fought in the Revolutionary War. I'm doing it for him. I didn't completely answer a question, I realized, an earlier question which asked how much money I'd spent. Well, I've spent about $13,000, but it's all out of my own pocket except $200 and I think $75, 76. It's my own money. It doesn't come from anybody else. It sure as hell doesn't come from out of this state, as the Obama smear campaign is trying to say. My opponent may say that he's not going to trade his vote for an endorsement, but his record of contributions, $5,400 in the 2008 cycle, which is the last one reported, surely shows, and 20% of that's from out of the state, surely shows that people appreciate his votes. And who those people are, they're not a penny of it came from ordinary citizens in Sheridan or Johnson County. Not a penny of that $5,400. Not a penny.
Thank you, gentlemen. This concludes the Buffalo Bulletin's Senatorial District 22 debate. We'd like to thank everybody for coming, and we deeply appreciate you being here, and we deeply appreciate the questions that you provided. I'd also like to thank Senator and Mr. Johnson for your participation. Have a good evening.